what is a clay arbalest, and can we make a strong build centered around him? That's what this video is going to be about. As I will get into in a second, the clay arbalest is a unit from the last expansion that is quite powerful. Powerful enough and simple enough that making a build around him can end up doing quite well. So well, in fact, that I think it warrants doing an entire video on it, because it's one of these funny builds that when you play it, you'll go, oh, actually, that is quite strong. In fact, all the build videos I do will always be things that are at the very least decently strong. None of these build videos are going to be something that is just kind of like, can we stack every buff on this unit? Well, you can stack every buff on every unit, right? But these builds are actually fairly decent. I've at the very least played them in multiplayer games, and they will do pretty well for you. Now, I'm saying that not just a toot my own horn, because somebody did leave a comment on my first video. I briefly went over this in my second video, but that's why I'm continuing to make these videos. He said something that it was effectively, I know making build videos might seem boring and trivial for you, but I used the build and it did quite well for me, and I felt happy with myself. And that's why I'm continuing to do these, because I think for a lot of you guys, you don't, I mean, obviously, you don't spend as much time on these games as I do, right? So some of you guys, you want a build that you can just go in and play and have fun with and do well. And that's what this video is going to be on the clay arbalest, because this unit is pretty interesting and cool. Now, as always, I do read every comment. I actually have my phone set up that every single comment you guys send me, I immediately can see right there. So I do read every comment, every one of them. So if you guys leave comments, it helps me make more videos. It helps me make them more interesting and more what you guys want. Particularly if you just say like, I like this, or that was interesting, or anything like that. It helps me know, because the big secret is it's kind of hard to make YouTube videos, because I don't really know if I'm doing good or not, other than just views, but like how do you track on views how good something is, right? Especially if I have more niche topics that I know will get less views, or if I have more niche topics that are for games that maybe aren't the most popular, right? Like, it's hard for me to know, like, hey, are you niche fans enjoying this or not? So it does help when you guys actually do end up leaving comments like that. So do make sure to like, do make sure to subscribe, and do make sure to leave a comment down below. So let's talk then about the clay arbalest. Instead of just having us sit here and stare at the clay arbalest, let's actually talk then about what's going on with the clay arbalest. Okay, now I did mention in my last video, this is 2 ranged videos in a row I do. I assure you I barely ever play ranged builds, but I just wanted to talk about this one because it was cool and it was out of the way. And for my last 2 videos, I did a typical cryomancy start and a zeal start. So for this one, I want to do something a little bit more diverse. It will still, well, you'll see. But this one's a bit more diverse because it uses a unit that's a non-racial unit. Now, non-racial means that you cannot transform this unit. You can't use a minor transformation. You can't use the greater transformation. It does not scale that wonderfully, but it is a unit that does have a lot to make up for it. Now, even though you cannot use a minor or major transformation on it, it does start as a construct, which does actually have some drawbacks, unfortunately. Now, the clay arbalest will make up for those drawbacks. Now, how does he make up for it? He's a very simple unit. You're probably looking at this list, you're saying he doesn't have a special ability, he doesn't have anything cool about him. What does he do then? Why am I even talking about this unit? Okay, shoot crossbow does 30 damage. That's a lot of damage. It's a single shot ability, and all 3 of these clay units do have some defining features with them. One is Legion. Legion, for every clay unit you have on the field, they get 1 defense, 1 resistance, and 1 physical damage up to 4 times. So if you have a 3v3 battle, a giant 18v18 battle, and you bring in the clay arbalest, so long as you have 4 clay units and those entire 18 units, which will be quite easy to maintain, they will get plus 8 physical damage, because that plus 1 is plus 1, plus 2, plus 3, plus 4, then doubled for single shots. That's plus 8 damage for defense, for resistance. This brings us to 38 damage. That's a lot of damage. We also then get 5 defense, 5 resistance. We do get -4 shock weakness. This is pretty difficult, but we will talk about how we get over this one. Of course, all construct units do have certain things that make them a little bit stronger. We have Heartless, so we take -50% morale damage. We have Reinforced, so if we were to hypothetically fight a different ranged build, we would have a pretty large advantage into that. And all Legion units have Undying. The first time we die, we don't. So with all these combined, clay arbalest is a pretty strong unit to build around. Now for the build here, I'm trying to scale into late game. So we're not only going to be using the clay arbalest, we will have some other things here, which I'll go into. But for the most part, we're going to be focusing on a unit that you know, it's going to be very strong in the mid game, and then we're going to need some support for it for the late game. How are we going to do a build like this? Especially a build where clay units can only be built if you have an underground city. You can see here I write these long bios of people in multiplayer taking way too long to join and make their factions, so that's why I have that. So our racial traits here are not going to be that important because we're not going to be really focusing on using our actual racial units past the early game, but we do want them to be good in the early game. We're of course going to need underground adaptation because we need to be underground to use the clay soldiers. That's pretty important with this build. And then I went strong to get more damage because, as you're going to see later, we went industrious. We can go with some different cultures with this build, so you can mix and match and do different things. I just went industrious because it's quite good in the early game, and I thought it would be good for getting all these early game battles, because when you start underground, you will have to take a lot of fights due to a certain society trait I'll go over in a second. But industrious is very strong in the early game. They are doing stuff outside. I really hope that doesn't screw up my video, and I hope you guys can't hear that. At any rate, strong is very good for getting us some early game power. It just, you know, +2 damage is quite good. All our early game units are going to be physical other than the one support unit we have, so this is going to help us out a lot in the early game. And then I went defensive tactics. I think that's pretty okay for a 2-pointer. I could do something else. Going with tough could be decent because a lot of these enemies you fight in the early game are going to be melee enemies. But, you know, industrious already is kind of a phalanxy kind of playstyle, so I thought defensive tactics would be fine there. If you're doing auto resolve, your AI is pretty good. Auto battle, I should say, whatever you want to call it. Your AI is pretty good at managing that, so yeah.
What is that?
Okay, this brings us to industrious, which I went, as I just talked about. I went industrious because we need a pretty decently strong early game, and it's, well, industrious is pretty good at the early game, and just, I mean, their units are tanky. The arbalest got buffed to be a bit more tanky, so it doesn't die as much. The support unit can heal every other turn, so it's good at keeping our health topped off. It's just overall a really good culture. It also allows us to set these cities up, because once we get that tier 2 tome, we want to start pumping out tier 3 units, which are going to be very expensive. So we want our city set up. We want to be able to afford these tier 3 units ASAP. We want good draft. So industrious is just a really good way to go about this. And yeah, that's about all I can say on that one. I just think industrious compared to the other cultures is better. This isn't to say you could do this build with feudal. I think that would be 100% viable. You could do this build with feudal monarchy even to get just a 10% damage boost onto your armies. Because we're using tome units, the entire build is focused on tome units. You can try to mix and match different cultures in here. For all these videos, I would recommend, like, if you ever think like, well, why didn't he do that? Couldn't he do that? Wouldn't that be stronger? Just go ahead and do that. Because at the end of the day, you know, just have fun with it, right? So for society traits, now society traits are going to be fairly, there's subterranean society. Why was that not selected? Society traits are going to be fairly stingy here on this regard. You're going to have to go subterranean society because that just makes underground builds actually viable. It's very strong subterranean society. Whenever you excavate an underground province, you have an extra chance of getting another resource. This can make your underground cities outrageously powerful. All the passages, the below and then the above, grant more Imperium. That's quite good. Your underground cities get more food income. This allows you, because with this build, you're gonna have a lot of special province improvements due to the Tome of the Depths, Underground Depths, I think it's called. I'll go over it in a second. So we're going to want lots of population to actually use all the special performance improvement bonuses. There is another thing I can do to get that better. I'll go over that in the tomes. It's, yeah. Bit of RNG, whether or not you get big enough caverns to actually use giant cities, which can be a bit screwy. As our second one, I did go Fabled Hunters, because we will take so many early game fights that clearing all those infestations, clearing all those resource nodes, we will want to heal a lot, and we're going to want all the extra resources from that to build up our giga cities. Fabled Hunters continues to be the gift that keeps on giving. It's just a really, really, really good society trait that will show up in most builds. Now for your first term, you have a lot of different choices. I went Tome of Enchantment, but I have thought about this a little. Tome of Enchantment is decent enough. We do get spell tempered shields, so if we do build a clay defender, the shield clay unit, to have like one unit on the front line just to block movement and stuff like that, he does get a bit tankier. We do have purging arrows to allow our ranged units to purge off enemy buffs and things like that, do more damage to magic origin units. We've got awakened tools, which allows us to draft out of our cities quite quite a lot more draft out of our cities. I mean, that's it. And then more production permanently. So Tome of Enchantment, it's not bad, I don't think, here. Runecarver's Camp also gives us more draft, which as we want to get out these clay units ASAP, this can be quite good as well. I had to make a small cut here because some dude with a leaf blower came like right past my window. At any rate, the alternative to Tome of Enchantment start is Tome of Zeal. That's because Tome of Zeal buffs range units as well as melee units. So this buffs every unit throughout the entire game. So this is going to help us out in the early game. It's going to help us out in the late game. Tome of Zeal is just one of those generally good tomes that helps you out all the time. It's just really, really good. This, of course, still gives us a fanatical workforce to build up our cities. That does cost a little bit of food, though, which we do need those special province appointments coming out. And, of course, we do get the Circle of Zealotry, which will give us drafts. So Tome of Zeal is definitely a potential start. And then, of course, if you want to be more, I guess, diverse, you can go with Tome of Enchantment. I think Tome of Enchantment might do slightly better, but Tome of Zeal is just so generally good that I think Tome of Zeal is just generally just going to be really good, right? As for our tome after that, to complete our tier 1 tomes, we're going to go with Tome of Alchemy. That's pretty basic, but I think it just generally, it's just, I mean, right? I mean, it's just Tome of Alchemy, right? We get the Alchemist Lab, we get that special province improvement, we get the cleanses, we can find decent amounts of magic material underground when we go subterranean society trait. So we got the material refinery, which can end up going pretty hard. And just, I mean, I've talked about Tome of Alchemy all the time, right? We do have some synergy with the underground subterranean society, just finding lots of magic material. So it's not only, I'm just saying go Tome of Alchemy because it's the best. There's a little bit of synergy here as well. But I mean, also, yeah, I mean, at some point it's like, go it because it's just going to be really, really good for you, right? As for our character itself, as of my last video, I actually decided to do another Crowmaster's Bow. That's because I wanted to do a ranged hero with a Giga Gun, because we're already doing a pretty ranged heavy build, and I thought start with Crowmaster's Bow, get that good early game clear, and then in the late game give him a Giga Gun, because we will have a pretty decent front line, which is a surprise, but we will have a pretty decent front line. So then having that decent front line and then a Giga Gun behind it on a really powerful hero that's just doing massive amounts of damage from range seemed like a pretty good option. So I thought that worked out pretty well, just going Crowmaster's Bow Ranger. Of course, you can still do Ritualist, you can still do anything else. I just sometimes I want to be thematic. Plus, I thought, you know, just being underground with a gun would, you know. Anyway, ambition's just gonna be Delver, because I mean, that seems pretty obvious, right? I mean, you're underground, you go Delver. Okay. So, once you start going to tier 2 tomes, your choices will be quickly pretty obvious. I mean, obviously, you're gonna go Tome of the Dungeon Depths, right? You're gonna go immediately into Tome of the Dungeon Depths. Now, of course, I hope I don't have to explain why this is so good already, but we have the Dungeoneering Conclave. This is a research post that will slowly turn the entire underground into a dungeon. Then once it's a dungeon, we get a lot of buffs from that. We get 2 production per adjacent dungeon province. So this is a special province bonus that gives us knowledge, terraforms everything into a dungeon. The dungeon does stack with everything that I can think of. So everything can become a dungeon plus whatever else it was, with the exception, I think, of pure lava or pure water provinces. You can't have pure water dungeons and pure lava dungeons. That one just doesn't seem to be doable. Other than that, lots of production, good knowledge. Clay Forge, per adjacent dungeon, we get production and draft. This stacks up a lot and will basically allow us to build every building in our cities quite quickly. And then, of course, this also allows us to build those clay units. So, as you can see, we can start getting into those tier 3 clay units rather quickly. So, being able to get our cities set up with lots of population and lots of buildings from the Fabled Hunters is it's gonna do us a lot of help, right? Then Underground Vault, we get gold, and gold per adjacent dungeon province. So this allows us to get all that gold that we would need to afford these tier 3 units. We also get Binding Essence, but Binding Essence only builds tier 1 and tier 2 units. So it's really, it's not that important, but at least we could have tier 2, at the very least, tier 2 items on every slot on every hero, right? Going back to heroes, by the way, if you want to do a Giant King, I think a Giant King would end up being better with this build anyway. So yeah, I definitely think being a Giant King would help you out. Silent Barracks gives us fortification health, which allows our cities to be very tanky. This one's not too important. It does allow us to defend a bit better because we get an extra clay unit in our battles. Then we also get more city stability per adjacent dungeon. It's not that important. We get fortification health, which can kind of help. Realistically, Silent Barracks is like the weakest of the 4 dungeon special performance improvements, but it can help if you're going to be attacked, right? Now, Raiders of the Deep gives us defense and resistance enchanted on every unit in our army, which is very strong. Then if we take that army above ground, we get a 10% damage multiplier. Now, that's not 1 damage, 2 damage, it's 10%. So this enchantment, if we took our clay arbalests above ground, even at that 38 base damage, this would be 3.8 damage on those clay arbalests. So already, Raiders of the Deep is kind of showing that, yeah, these clay arbalests can start hitting pretty hard, and range units typically get weaker enchantments, so this Raiders of the Deep is just really good for that. Dungeon Hazard is also just a pretty good spell. It can slow enemy armies, allowing you to set up battles much better. And then it does 15 damage, 30 damage if they're in a dungeon province. So it's good on the defense, but mostly you're going to use it to start battles with enemy slug. Now, for your next tome, it's going to be a bit of a crapshoot. If you went with Tome of Enchantment for your 4th tome, you can actually go back and grab Tome of Zeal to buff up your clay arbalests with even more damage. Now, the alternative, and I've done both sides of this, you can go Tome of Zeal, buff up your arbalest damage. That's good. Tier 2 tomes tend to be generally weaker, so a lot of times people will go back and just grab a tier 1 tome. But your other option, if you do RNG some good cities, I have gone for the, I have talked about this one a lot, the Tome of Fertility. That's because Tome of Fertility has bountiful fields. This affects grasslands or fungal fields, which are pretty common underground. And this is just a lot of food income and can be quite useful, but mostly this Temple of Fertility, because that per population gives you a lot of food, and a lot of draft. Now, if we have RNG'd some good, wide, open caverns for us to have these cities in, Temple of Fertility can allow us to turn everything, because as I did mention earlier, dungeon stacks with everything. So every single province can be a fungal field and a dungeon. The fungal field will allow us to have a crap load of mana from bountiful fields, allowing us to not really have to worry about mana anymore. We got the Temple of Fertility, so we can get to large amounts of food, to have large amounts of population, filling out the underground to get all those special province improvements, boosting every tile around them. And then generally just Blossom of Life is a pretty good combat spell early in the game. It can be kind of tough to deal with enemies who are healing, what is that, 18 per turn in an AoE. It's just one of those things that's just kind of frustrating to deal with. And Summon Nymph is just a decent summon. It's got a full cleanse AoE. It does have a long cooldown though. Not exactly the most mobile when she uses it either, but she's a decent enough unit, could be buffed a little bit. Anyway, once we get to tier 3, that's when these things can get, I did mention that the arbalest has -4 lightning resist, but we can fix that, and we can fix that pretty easily by going Tome of the Dreadnought. Now at tier 3, we've got lots of different options for this build, so you can go one way or you can go the other way. There's lots of different ways you can take this. Tome of the Dreadnought isn't required, but it can be quite good. That's because of, right here we got Warding Metals. This gives Warded, which gives all our shield units and all our constructs. So as wood, if we still do have these early game shield units, they actually do become warded. Like if you have those, if you're trying to use the bastions from Industrious, or if you're trying to use their tier 1 shield unit, if they haven't died off and they're still in your army, they get warded as well, which can be quite good. But this makes our constructs, all of them, get 3 resistance and 3 defense against magic attacks. So they will now have a lot of resistance. So if they're not using lightning damage, we're going to mitigate that down to like 0, because we're going to have 5 base resistance, then 3 more against magic damage. I mean, not to 0, but we're going to mitigate it by like 40%, a lot, right? And then even electrical damage is going to have a hard time getting through this. We got the Great Bombard, which is, it's okay, not exactly great. Ironclad is still pretty bad. Tuning kits can be pretty decent. Overcharge still says plus 50 damage instead of 50%. Plus 50% damage can be pretty good because this can, you can run up, heal when you're clay arbalists, and then they can shoot someone at 50% more damage on top of all their other buffs that will hit pretty hard. Other than that, I mean, we're looking for warding metals, tuning kits, pinning barrage can be decent for doing an AoE immobilize, but the big thing here is War Foundry. Now this gives us a lot of draft. And in addition to that, construct units are produced with +2 ranks. Construct units includes all those clay units, and then later on, the surprise, although you can probably guess what it is, big melee defender we're going to use to allow this build to scale into late game by still having a frontline. You don't have to go Tome of the Dreadnought, but I would call it quite a good idea. Your other choices are, of course, Tome Transmutation, just because Tome Transmutation is really strong, because Transmutation Circle is really strong. We probably don't have those liquids underground, so being able to grab all 3 liquids will give us a lot of knowledge, but if we've painfully gotten through... actually, I think the snow underground can have liquids, yeah. But the odds of us getting all 3 liquids off one snow biome catch is not very high, right? But Transmutation Circle is really strong. Just getting those extra special resources is strong, both for being able to craft really powerful magic items, and also just because getting these, I mean, they're just strong, right? Adaptive armor is also decent for making our melee units tank a bit longer, but this isn't too required. Transmutation's decent for transmute resources as well, but again, yeah, Tome of the Dreadnought's going to be a big winner here. There are some other choices you can do as well. So for example, you go Tome of Terramancy, try to buff up battle mages, so you can do like a Terramancy and a Transmutation, try to like shuffle this build into a late game battle mage build. I mean, you're kind of getting off the rails if you do that one though, so I'm not sure I would recommend that. At any rate, my big recommendation would be Tome of the Dreadnought, and then going over to Order and grabbing a Tome of Sanctuary. Now, this is going to make you quite frustrating for enemies to fight, because you're going to have Keeper's Mark. Anointed People won't work, so don't worry about that one. But we will have Keeper's Mark, which will make our front line a little bit stronger, not that great. And so I'm saying, like, which tomes you go with, it's going to be a bit wild, because it really depends on how the game's playing out and how things are going, right? So we could get Keeper's Mark, and if we're using a clay front line still, then that clay front line will... they're going to get steadfast for 1 turn. Then once you kill them, they're going to come back to life. They won't reset Keeper's Mark, so they'll only get it once per battle. But you're going to kill them, they get steadfast, you kill them for real, then they come back to life, then you have to kill them again. So it can just be really frustrating to deal with clay defenders when that's happening. Salvation's good, Consecrated Domain is really good, Healing Spires is good, Sanctuary is very frustrating. So Tome of Sanctuary is good, but again, Anointed People doesn't affect us because we're not using racial units. Keeper's Mark doesn't affect range units, so a little bit of an issue with that one. I haven't quite found a best option here. Much like the 4th tome, there's not like a best option on this one. Once we get past this, it's going to be pretty obvious that we only have best options left. So that's why I would say Tome of the Dreadnought is pretty much an auto grab. After that, I would probably just go Tome of Transmutation just to get those magic materials. All options are okay. I mean, all of them have their own downside, right? But once we do get into that tier 4, our choices are going to be pretty obvious. Tome of the Crucible, because meteor projectiles is going to make our range units hit really hard. All our range units now get 3 damage, increased for single shots at 6 damage on their attacks. Then remember, they have a 10% modifier from Raiders of the Deep from the Tome of the Dungeon Depths. So, you know, we're seeing a lot of damage here, especially if we have Tome of Zeal. We're starting to stack up a lot of damage. You can actually do, if you really want, you could actually do 2 tier 1 tomes for damage enchantments. Then go Tome of the Dungeon Depths with Tome of Alchemy, or you could even triple buff your units, right, at the first 4 tomes. It really depends on what you want. Anyway, meteor projectiles is going to be a big kick here to very high damage, as well as Crucible Battlements, because Crucible Battlements gives us any unit constructed in the city gets +1 fire damage. So it's a good way to get our units even more damage, as well as the battlement structure itself is okay, I guess. If we're defending on the battlement structure, our cities, when we're defending, we get to shoot on them, we get even more range. Then that range will, the units, when they sit on it, they get more range, they get more damage, and then they set the tile on fire, so enemies can't really turtle up and try to whittle you away. So Crucible Battlements is a pretty strong one. Lava Burst is pretty good, much like Tome of the Dreadnought, got that AoE Immobilize. Now we can just get an AoE Auto Slow, plus all enemies have all the tiles light on fire. So that one's pretty good. That one's one, and this is also one. This is also why, by the way, back in tier 3, Tome of Terramancy is another choice you can go with, because the Excavated Leyline gives you more world map casting points in case you want to use some of these world map spells. I'm just saying, probably Tome of the Dreadnought and the Tome of Transmutation, but you know, you get choices. Tome of the Crucible, though, this is an auto grab, very strong. Great Foundry is something you can build. I guess it's not exactly great. You can probably put it next to one of your Tome of the Dungeon that special province improvements. So at the very least, you get like 13 gold and 5 draft off it. More draft is good because, you know, what you really want to be doing with this build is shoving armies into the enemy. If we get into the late game, 3 armies, we'll probably lose to their 3 armies. But you can have like 6 armies. You could take a big battle, lose it, take another big battle right after that. You know, chase them down. Tome of the Golden Realm. This is what we're going next. As you might have guessed, Gold Golem. Because we did buff constructs with our Tome of the Dreadnought. So Gold Golem comes out with +1 rank. Now this is a very big mythic unit. He's pretty hard to buff on his own. But he will get +1 damage from that Tome of the Crucible, because he does get built in a city. He will get +2 ranks from Tome of the Dreadnought. So he's going to come out even tankier. And he is a mythic unit on his own. So realistically, I would say Gold Golem is... You put 1 in each stack. So you have 3 Gold Golems just sitting in the front. So let's say you have 3 Gold Golems, 4 Arbalests. That's 12 Arbalests sitting in the back, 3 Gold Golems, 3 heroes. That's a pretty good setup. Gold Golems, because Tome of the Dreadnought also gives him warded, he's just going to be a really, really tanky, frustrating enemy to deal with. Yeah, I mean, he's just going to be a total frontline block. He's just a brick, right? He's sitting on the front line. This is how we're gonna get into the late game, is what I'm trying to say. Then we got Gold Touched. This makes our race, it's a minor race transformation. It gives us gold per population in our cities. So even though it is a minor race transformation, and you might think, well, why are you transforming your race? It helps us get more gold. So let's say throughout all our cities, we had like 50, 60 population. That's gonna be 60 more gold. That's pretty good from that perspective. It doesn't have to be that strong in battle, because out of battle it's just more gold generation. Then it gives us more resistance to just make our heroes a little bit tankier. Gilding Blast is okay, not exactly blowing my mind. Luxury Market allows us to use the buyout action 2 times per world map turn instead of 1. So if you wanted, you could actually buy out 2 gold golems per turn. So even if we are losing armies, we can just be chucking new armies in there, right? Battle of Attrition. Sometimes you can't win one big battle, but you can win the second big battle, or even the third big battle, right? And then we've got Regent Refinery. So this is also why I like Tome of Transmutation, because when we do Tome of Transmutation combined with the Tome of Alchemy, we've got the Material Refinery. The Tome of Transmutation will buff the Material Refinery by giving us more magic material. And then all the way down here, we've got the Tome of the Golden Realm giving us the Regent Refinery, which then gives us food and draft per magic material in the realm. Sometimes I forget to mention things and then I go back. It's like, yeah, that's why the transmutation circle is really helping us, right? So when you look at it from this line down, and tomes are kind of like your tech tree, right? So when you're looking at it from the top to the bottom, the build starts off making sense, and then it just continues to make more and more and more sense as time goes on, right? So everything in Tome of the Golden, why did I say it like that? Everything in the Tome of the Golden Realm was helping us. Then of course we got the Bazaar of Wonders. So this is just going to be a lot more gold, because we're going to want to be pumping these armies out with Luxury Market. If we lose an army, we lose a lot of clay dudes in one battle, it doesn't matter. We pump them out, we just go back into it, right? Now this is what completes the build, because Tome of the Creator in the last expansion got a rework. I hope you guys have played this game enough to know it, but if you don't, that's cool too. Tome of the Creator gives us Shaper's Touch. Now this is a major unit enchantment, a very powerful one, that gives all enchanted units natural regeneration, so they heal 10% of their health per turn, 10 hit points, and 2 lightning resist. This affects all elementals and all constructs. This does, of course, affect our Gold Golem, and it does, of course, affect all our clay arbalests. So all our clay arbalests now have more hit points. They now heal every turn, and they have more lightning resist. So the first time you kill them, no you don't, they come back to life. And they're healing each turn, and our gold golems are healing each turn, and they're being quite tanky now, even against lightning damage. So Shaper's Touch is what makes this build very tanky, while also still having those clay arbalests outputting pretty good damage. We also get Call the Titan of the Earth, which is another way to get a front line. Call the Titan of the Earth will summon a unit down. He did get a little bit of a buff. He's not amazing anymore, but he's pretty good for getting something on the front line that just sits on the front line and makes it really difficult for enemies to reach your clay arbalests, because in battle we summon down the Titan of the Earth. He immediately does a seismic slam, so all enemies within 2 hexes have a high chance of being immobilized. Then he himself is just a really big beefy boy sitting on the front line, being quite difficult for enemies to kill. Once you do kill him, once he does have Undying. I don't remember. Does he have combat summon the 3 turns? There was something weird about that I couldn't remember. But all enemies lose their defense mode and retaliation attacks as well. So you can summon him down, remove retaliation attacks from enemies, then you can walk out of their range. Then they're stuck in the Titan of the Earth's range. Then you get to shoot them with your clay arbalest, because they only need 1 action point to shoot and do all that damage. So it's just a very, very good build at this point. We also have Tectonic Shatter, which it's decent as a spell. It can be good, and it can do really good if you get lucky, right? All enemies have a 60% chance of being stunned. Can be really, really good. Whether you use Tectonic Shatter or Titan the Earth, that's going to depend on your battlers. Both of them are pretty good spells. Both of them are pretty good right now. Tectonic Shatter is probably overall a little bit better, but Titan the Earth I kind of like more, just because I just personally like it more. There's nothing else to say. Earthshaker Engines is also a choice that you can make. Is the best thing I can say about it. So overall, let's then review the build, assuming you made the correct choices here. We open up, we buff our range units, we buff our range units again. For people wondering about Tome of the Rock, I have tried it and I have not liked it that much. I think Tome of the Rock is one of these tomes that's almost good without actually being good. It's almost good, it just quite isn't there. Tome of the Construct affects constructs, but it's mostly there for actually buffing, weirdly not constructs. I find it's mostly there for buffing Pyre Templars, which is a bit odd, but okay. Main thing we're looking for, again, Tome of the Alchemy, Tome of Transmutation, Tome of the Golden Realm. This is going to set our cities up. Tome of Fertility can allow our cities to get enough population to actually use all these special province improvements. And overall, we're just looking down. Middle game, I should say mid-game, we're looking to get clay arbalests and maybe 1 clay defender in the front to just tank and be really frustrating for enemies to get through. Spike Shield is okay. Overall, the unit is okay. I mean, Reinforce makes him quite tanky in combined with Legion. So with Legion, he would have 9 defense from the front, 7 resistance from the front, a mere 80 HP though, so he's not... Clay Arbalest, quite good. Clay Charger. Ironically, Clay Charger, despite being slow, can be good because it can knock enemies out of their retaliation attacks. And then, as we went over with Legion, he gets that +8 damage. So 29 damage plus an additional 60% damage. That can do pretty good. And we've got all these damage boosts on him, right? So the clay units are pretty strong in the early game. And then later in the game, we've got the Golden Golem. The Golden Golem, I mean, just look at this dude, right? I mean, just look at this dude. I mean, there's so many effects, I gotta scroll down here. God, he just stuns everyone who attacks him. He's really... Oh, you just sit him on defense mode in the front, and if they're not flying, they're not gonna reach your arbalests. He can just be quite a frustrating, beefy boy to deal with. So, that's the entire clay arbalest build. I mean, in these videos, I try to give you guys as many options as I can think of. So, there's not just like, do this, 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 and then everyone follows it, and they're like, yes, sir. I mean... Okay, you know, if you want to diversify it a little bit, but I do think the build that I have for you is pretty solid. There's no real downsides to anything. It's pretty good. So that's it. Clay Arbalest build. I mean, I guess I'm looking at the Golden Golem, so let's go to Clay Arbalest. Clay Arbalest build, pretty good unit. Definitely an interesting dude. We'll see if the next expansion gives us anything else to work with. So thank you all for watching. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, everybody. And as always, I hope you all have a great rest of your day.